Hello, I hope you're all well, and I'm pleased to welcome you back to briefing number 2 of a dissertation project. This briefing will center on how to develop a topic for research in order to ensure a successful dissertation outcome. And we will be looking at those two aspects in turn. So, the first part of this presentation will concentrate on looking at how to identify a topic. So what are the features of a good research question, and how can we go about refining a topic once we have a general question in place? And we will be providing you with examples in order to facilitate your understanding of this process. So let's get started. First of all, I should like to say that there is not one generic right or wrong way to go about conducting the research itself and writing your dissertation, but there are some general guidelines on good practice, and I will share my guidelines with you. I mean, you should obviously note that those can be sometimes different for everyone, and across different programs as well. So I think it's important that you assess what is being said, that you digest it, but also that you discuss issues you may have with your supervisor, who will be the person closest to your project, and then decide whether you're going to reject or adopt a certain practice. This being said, however, and in any event, I think there are some key parameters that remain the same for all. So you have 3 months from the start to finish of your dissertation. It should be 12,000 words maximum, and it is very important that you stick to the word count. And you will find that although this looks quite a lot of words, by the time you finish writing your dissertation, you may have to cut out quite a bit. Now, so therefore you have limited resources in time, but also in terms of means of respondents and access in order to carry out your dissertation. And finally, it's also important that this dissertation has a connection with academic literature. The topic you have chosen may come from your observation of working, say, in an organization of some sort. However, it is important that as part of a literature review, you actually bring in some academic thinking. So 3 really key issues when you're going to start building up your dissertation. First of all, and this is mostly dealt in chapter 1, is it a useful and sensible topic? So you have to explain to us why it is actually worthwhile for you to research this topic. Secondly, is there a literature base? Although you could have out there some really interesting topics, if very little has been written on the subject, it's going to be very difficult for you to actually put together in 3 months a project and compare it and contrast it with our knowledge. So when I talk about literature, obviously talk about academic literature, but you can also find useful publications in quality practitioners' paper, or indeed in the quality press, such as the Financial Times, The Economist, etc. That would be obviously the subject of your literature review in chapter 2. And then finally, another very key aspect is really, can you get the data? There are very interesting projects that never come to fruition simply because they may be too sensitive and nobody would particularly want to be interviewed about it, or they you may not be able to reach the people you want to interview. If you are doing research on chief executive officers and you need a sample of 15, you do realize that those people are very busy, and it may be very difficult for you to actually get to talk to them for any length of time. So these are really the building blocks of your dissertation, and these are part of these are the 3 chapters which you will submit as a draft to your supervisor, and on which you'll get formative feedback. This will be sometime in July. So some general points we want to sort of stress at this stage. It's important that you have an idea already of what you want to research, and this is fine, but it's important that you're able to express a question and the aims of your work quite clearly. So you should be able to summarize your research in a sentence, 2 or 3 maximum. But if you are having to actually write, half a page to tell us what your research is about, then this needs refining. It's important also that you put boundaries around your research. So you need to mark out the parameter of your research, what it is you're covering and what it is you're not covering, and why. This is simply because you need to be really focused. You can't do everything in 3 months. And also, it's particularly important to have a question which is suitably focused, because if it's too vague, your conclusions will be equally vague, and that will be detrimental to the quality of your dissertation. You also have to think about context. Is your topic going to be sort of concerning one particular country, a sector, or even perhaps a company, a case study, for example, or a function in this company, or indeed even a process. So all those things can enable you to build your research question. I think it's also important, once you have this in place, that you manage the reader's expectations. You don't promise too much, because invariably you won't be able to deliver. So, but it's important by the same token that you say clearly what you're going to do and why. And the justification of your choice of topic and of your focus is really quite important. So you have to choose also certain methods, and again, this needs to be justified in relation to your questions, for example. And then, of course, you also need to tell us why you think you've reached a solid conclusion, and why we should be able to believe the conclusion you're offering us as to the way you've solved the research problem. So basically, you have to sell your project to the reader. And as part of that, I think it's also important for you to be reflexive in terms of, you have to think, what is it that you are bringing to the project? What are your assumptions, for example? And how have those 2 things, so the skills you bring to the project, but also your assumption, how has this actually affected the way you carried out the project? No project is perfect, really. So there are always limitation, weaknesses to a project, and to the findings that are almost necessarily always incomplete. I think it's important that you spell this out generally in the conclusion. Again, if we now move on to the research topic, there is not an absolute ideal, research topic, but there are things that clearly are not suitable for a research question. So it has actually to be a question rather than a statement. So if you tell us that better leaders are emotionally intelligent, this is fine, but there's nothing to solve there. This is simply a statement. So it's not going to help you basically carry out any research. You need to problematize this. You can still look at, emotional intelligence in leaders and how this impacts on their leadership, but that needs to be problematized. It mustn't be too simple. So if you are capable of answering in a sentence or half a paragraph, then clearly, as what are the mobile data rates on different forms of wireless business communication devices, then this is just simply too precise and it's too straightforward to answer. You do not have a dissertation topic here. It also needs to be doable. It's not a PhD, so it needs to be doable in 3 months, not 3 years. And so something broad like what makes a good leader in business is going to require a lot of resources to tackle, and is clearly not going to be feasible in the time you've got imparted. And then it needs to be reasonably precise. And I've mentioned before that you need to be focused and you need to have boundaries around your topic. Okay. So, for example, if we look at the last topic here, what are the barriers to mobile working adoption placed on sales organization by limited data rates? Now, it's a very clear way of stating a problem. And we have obviously the problem, which are the barriers to mobile working, but we also got a very specific environment in which we are looking at this, sales organizations. And that places immediately a set of boundaries around this particular topic. And this is a topic that clearly can be carried out in the time you've given and with the means you have to devote to this particular research process. So if we summarize what has been said already about the process, it's important to identify a topic area. You have to try and look at it and test it for relevance and practicality. And you have to refine it, obviously, but think within the scope and resources that you have to work with. For example, you need to think that if you do adopt a qualitative methodology, you'll be the only one carrying out the interviews, and you'll have to transcribe the interviews, etc. So you are limited in terms of your resources. You need to look for balance, as we've seen, in terms of breadth on the one hand and feasibility on the other hand. So it may be a very good topic, but if you think you can't access your data, or if you think there is no literature on it, then it won't be doable. And then finally, obviously, you need to focus in a way that there is an answer to a question. So this is, as I say, problematize your topic. So how would you, starting the process now of identifying this topic, how would you go about it? Well, I'm sure you've been giving some thoughts already as to this, but it could be that you are interested in a particular topic. You've done a module, for example, on corporate social responsibility, and there are some aspects that have really, captivated you, and you want to maybe research those aspects a little bit further. Or you could be interested in social media and social media in supply chains, for example. So there is a variety of ways if you have an interest or indeed a passion. It could also be that your choice is going to be guided by your career sort of project. So if you want to, say, work in the finance industry, or if you are interested in professional services, then it may well be that you see your dissertation as a way for you to learn more about those environments and impress potential future recruiters as well with an in-depth piece of work. So this is very important to consider. The practicality we have stressed already. Yes, you need to access data. Primary research is involved in your project, and it's absolutely essential that you gather data. It may well be that you are employed, or that the employer requires you to do a particular type of project or a particular project. So this occasionally can be the reason why you've chosen a certain topic. And then finally, I've mentioned this before, but it's really important. You need to consider what it is you are good at and what you like doing. So, for example, if you are good at statistics and you've got some grounding in that discipline, this is fine. You can, you can rely on this, and you obviously have to improve it and to refine it to do your analysis, but this is doable. However, if you've never done any statistics before, but are thinking of doing a project based on that, be aware that you will not have the time to build your knowledge in this, on that, in that discipline, as well as carry out your dissertation. The dissertation work is quite intense, and it will be better for you to consider other way of carrying out an analysis, for example. So think about your skills, abilities, and how they match the sort of project and questions you're trying to solve. Okay. Now, obviously, you may be a little bit panicked by all this, because you think, I'm interested in one or two things, but it's still very, very broad at the moment. This is not a problem, because we are going to try and show you ways of developing your project. So if you start from a very broad area, for example, say how consultants work, or the role of social media in supply chain management, you need to start saying why you want to look at this topic. So try to think of the reasons why you want to look at the topic and why it will be useful for you. Then the next thing is to try to test the concept. So say you've identified a broad area, such as, I want to look at how consultants work because I want to work in the area, as we've mentioned before. So what I suggest you do is you ask separately a couple of people, obviously people with certain education, but what they think your project is about and what the key issues are. Now, if they come back to you with quite different views about what they think it is, then the area is really not precise enough. So think about their responses to your own responses to their comments, and try to refine your project by saying, no, I'm more interested in focus on this, or I want to do this, and etc. And that may actually help you to define your project further. There are also some practical tests that are involved. So you could do, and I suggest you do, a very quick review of the existing literature. So you can do this by entering keywords in the library database, for example, and see whether there is a vast volume of information, if there is indeed a good literature base, or if it is quite patchy. It is always suggested that you look at the most recent journals and the better rated journals as well, the ABS list, for example. And that will tell you what are the current debates and the areas discussed, if there are any industry sources, for example. And then, as I mentioned earlier, in the good quality daily and weekly press, you can see what the trends and forecasts are on a particular question. Sometimes something which is really very helpful is if you find a meta-analysis of a literature. Now, this is for areas that are really, I've seen a considerable amount of research done on a particular topic or a particular issue. And so the literature would have been screened via meta-analysis. This is a very good way in a topic if you can actually find it. They don't exist on all topics, of course. Now, the other thing mentioned earlier, but still worth remembering as part of the practical tests is, do you have any access to the data you need to gather? So do you have any contacts in the company? Maybe you've done an internship, for example, and you have kept in touch with a number of people that could be facilitate your way in if you wanted to go and do interviews or distribute the questionnaires. Do you have any family contacts you can fall back on? And bear in mind always that people are quite busy and that people can be very hard to access. And this is obviously becomes truer as you go up the hierarchy of an organization. Finally, last but not least, I would say, is will this be of interest to you in 3 months' time? Because you have to be able to maintain your interest. Otherwise, it becomes very, very cumbersome to do research work on a topic that, after all, you are no longer terribly interested in. So you need to be able to cope with the intensity of work. So make sure that the topic is something you really can, that can keep your interest going for 3 months, shall we say. Now, so refining down from the general, let's look at how we may do it with a particular topic. So you're interested in mobile working. So you start reading around it a little bit. You're also interested in strategy, as it happens. So you could combine those two aspects, and you read or discuss, place your discussion around mobile working and strategy. And then you have a view that you may want to try to start a company, a tech company. So then again, you could think about digital natives versus digital immigrants, for example, in the use of mobile technology. And you see, little by little, we've moved down from a really quite general thing to basically wording your topic, such as what are the different attitudes to mobile work between digital natives and digital immigrants, and what, if anything, should an organization do to enable both? And here you are, you have got a topic that is quite doable in 3 months and is really clearly focused and has got very clear boundaries. On the other hand, you could perhaps have started from a very narrow area. So say you worked in a company and you observe certain aspects of the management, and you think that you would want to improve the change management process in IT projects in company X. Now, this is very, very precise. So what you need to do really is specify the parameters of a website to underpin the launch of a new product for company Z. That's also very specific. So you have to try to see why you want to look at this topic and why specifically that would be useful. And what you will need to do is to refine up from the specific. So you could, for example, look at the organization as a case study. So you move from the general issue, you move to a general issue from a very specific context, okay? One of the factors in the mix as a focus could be an SME, a startup, a tech business, etc. And you could see how they interrelate and create a particular topic worthy of research. And what you could do as well is you could potentially look at comparative design. Okay, so you look at different organizations and you compare and contrast them on this very particular issue you've identified. And finally, another way of doing it could be to do a literature review of the particular area you are focusing on, and then to use a specific context you've looked at to illustrate that literature review. So there are many different ways of refining up from a very specific example. So here is another way of showing you how you could do it. So these are all different topics that need to be refined up. And you can look at the various elements here, and you can see how you could assemble them to develop a real topic that could constitute a case study. So you could look at social media use in micro SMEs, and you could look at how they are acquiring social media competencies and how that supports a business effectively. So it brings together various things. It brings together the issue of training and development. It brings together the context, which is an SME, and then a social media use within that SME, and the notion of setting up and delivering social media training. So as you can see, that if you articulate this, you end up with a specific and broad enough research project. Now, how do you, there are ways of expressing the problems you're interested in. So some vocabulary can be used as a tool, obviously. So you could think about phrasing it as, what are the barriers to and facilitators of X in Y, okay? So how do consultants, for example, perceive X and Y? Or barriers to training in SMEs, the case of company C, if you, for example, want to look at a case study. So different phrases and expressions can help you encapsulate your topic. And here we are, a few examples of topics that have been used for research in previous years. So, for example, what are the key factors supporting adoption and use of effective mobile communication in Asian SMEs? So basically what you're doing here is you're looking at a process, okay, adoption and use of effective mobile communication, and a practice, and you're looking at it in the context of both a certain countries and specific organizations in that country. So SMEs, it could be Asian SMEs in Asia, or it could be SMEs of run by Asian people in a different context. But again, there are very clear boundaries here. So, and similarly, you can see that there are other examples of suitable dissertation topics. So how do we summarize this process? Well, as we've said, in order to choose a suitable topic, you have an example of different ways you can proceed. So think about the modules you found interesting. Think about specific topics within those modules, okay? And then another way would be to think about a sector you particularly would like to work in or you're interested in, and or indeed a particular specific organizational environment you want to work in. So for example, you are interested in virtual organizations, or you may be, another context would be you're interested in supply chains, okay? So that will be one way of characterizing your particular topic. And finally, you need to think how current the topic is and whether the topic is under research. It is a famous research gap you're looking for in order to make your contribution. And think also how useful this research is going to be for your next career move. Okay, so if in the case, for example, you want to move into a specific sector, if you want to be employed in a specific sector after completing your studies, then that could be a very useful vehicle for you. But maybe you have a different motivation. Maybe you're interested in doing further research, a PhD, for example. Then again, I think the choice of topic and area will help you move towards your aim. Perhaps you may even want to start a business yourself. And that again can be part of your motivation in terms of your choice of topic. We've seen how to refine the topic. So either you refine down from a very general idea you have, or you refine it up from a very specific situation you've observed or you noted and you wanted to find out more about. Think about the literature review. Is there really enough literature on this topic? And where do you find this literature? Is it in reputable journals? What is the size of a gap in the research, and how are you going to be able to tackle that? Again, and thinking about your own preferences and abilities, pick a topic and a research question that fits a design you want and are able to carry out. And that's really quite important. Then finally, you need to think about the feasibility. Okay, so can you find respondents? It may be a very interesting topic, but are you going to be able to find respondents and data? Are you going to have enough resources to carry out your work? And basically think also about the time factor and about planning and the ethics of the topic you've chosen. And generally, we have for a broad ethics sort of clearance for this module, but think that if you intend, for example, to carry out research on, say, children and advertising sort of methods, etc., you will need a full ethical review, and that takes a lot of time. So try to think about that aspect as well when you choose a topic. Is it going to require a full ethical review because it's dealing with people that are considered more vulnerable, children, etc., or is it going to fall within the ethical approval we already have? And then how do you get started? Well, I suggest that you brainstorm as many ideas as possible. It's useful to try to look at competing ideas, because it means that you are going to have to think quite clearly why you select one rather than another, and to justify why you do this. So this is a good way of proceeding. Choose something that you're interested in, really, and something you think that you will be able to maintain your interest in, at least for the duration of a project. Read effectively. And by this, I mean, look at reputable sources, recent sources, and aim for quality, not quantity. Keep notes and organize, by themes, what you've read. It's very important to keep notes, otherwise one publication, will replace the next in your mind, and you won't know what to take away from those. It's particularly important when we read the literature review as markers, as readers, that we have a narrative thread. Okay, so it's not, what's important is not that you've read 150 publications. What's important is that you have been able to analyze what you've read, and you can give us a picture of the state of knowledge on your particular topic. The research design needs to be appropriate to the topic. Obviously, certain questions require certain designs in order to be answered, and feasible. You need to be able to carry it out, and realistic in terms of both the time you've got and your personal skills. And you need to start early, because invariably things do not go according to plan, unfortunately. And you need to be able to have this buffer in your sort of project, planning, that enables you to sort of backtrack on some things and try something else if something hasn't worked as part of your as you proceed in your research, so to speak. And all of this actually is what's important in all of this is to put a lot of effort in your research proposal, because really, once you've decided on your questions, on the design, and once you've gathered a broad idea of the literature, then these are really the pillars of your actual project. And that will make it much easier to carry out the field work. And then obviously, when you get to the writing up times, it will make it much easier to start writing up. So it will, the time you spend on your research question and research proposal will actually save you time in the long run. Okay, this is the end of part 1, and I'll get back to you with part 2, where we are going to look at what characterizes a successful dissertation. And as part of this, I'll touch upon notion of originality in doing research. Thank you for listening.